The first thing I felt was his hand on my wrist, not rough, not rude, just firm enough to stop me from lifting the cake I had saved for. The cashier leaned across the scratched counter, his voice so low it was almost swallowed by the hum of the lights. "Are you Linda Parker, Michael's mother?" My lips wouldn't work. I just nodded. He glanced at the line behind me, then back at me, his eyes shadowed with a worry I'd only ever seen on people who had watched something wrong for too long. "Then you need to be careful. Your daughter-in-law's family, they're not what they seem." My stomach dropped. A cold wind pressed through the automatic doors, and for a heartbeat, the world felt split in two. The life I thought I knew and the one his whisper had just opened. Asterisk, asterisk, if you're watching this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has traveled. Asterisk, I stumbled out of the store, clutching the cake to my chest. But the words still rang in my ears like a low alarm. They're not what they seem. The parking lot was alive with ordinary noise, carts rattling against metal rails, engines humming, a child's sharp cry when a balloon slipped into the gray Oregon sky. Everything looked normal, and yet nothing felt normal anymore. The cold Portland wind cut through my coat, sharper than it should have been, as if it wanted me awake. Bafa was waiting in the car, his head bent over his phone, probably scrolling through work emails even on a Saturday. He had grown into the kind of man any mother would be proud of, steady, hardworking, kind to a fault. I should have walked straight to him. I should have placed the cake in the back seat, smiled, and carried on like nothing had shifted. But curiosity pressed against my chest like a stone. My pulse pounded with a mix of dread and something else, hope. Maybe that the whisper was nothing more than bitter gossip. Instead of going to the car, I turned. The side of the building loomed gray and wet, streaked with rainwater. I slipped around the loading dock and crouched behind two dumpsters that reeked of bleach and old fruit. My knees protested, my breath clouded in the cold air, but I stayed hidden. I needed to see for myself if kindness or cruelty had driven that warning. 2 minutes passed. My hands were trembling from the chill and from fear that I was being ridiculous. Then the glass doors slid open with a hiss. Richard Carter, my daughter-in-law Sophie's father, he strode out as though the world owed him sunlight. In each hand he carried glossy shopping bags that gleamed black, the kind you don't get from grocery aisles. Gold letters caught the fading light like sharp edges. They were designer bags. He pressed a button and a Range Rover chirped, its headlights flashing in the drizzle. The SUV was pale, spotless, new enough to smell of leather, even from where I crouched. Richard stacked the bags inside with the careful grace of a man arranging fine glass. Then he answered a phone call, his mouth curving into a relaxed smile, the smile of someone who believed everything would bend in his favor. I froze. My son had worked 3 double shifts this week. I had seen the gray under his eyes, the slump in his shoulders. And here was Richard, the man whose family cried emergency every other month, living as if debt and worry were just costumes he could shrug off. A chill spread through me that had nothing to do with the weather. Maybe the cashier had been right. Asterisk, asterisk, I pressed my back against the cold concrete wall, heart thudding as Richard's SUV purred out of sight. My breath came in short bursts, white against the gray drizzle. I wanted to believe what I had just seen was nothing, that maybe the bags were gifts, maybe the car was borrowed. But memory, sly and merciless, began pulling threads I had tried too long to ignore. 3 months ago, Sophie had called me late one evening. Her voice cracked over the phone, soft with tears. "Mom, Dad's medication is too expensive. Insurance won't cover it. Could Michael help, just this once?" I didn't hesitate. I slipped $60 from the grocery envelope I kept in the kitchen drawer. The bills thinned from being handled too often, and left them in their mailbox that night. I told myself it was the right thing, family helping family. But the next morning, waiting for the bus, I saw Richard glide by in a navy suit so crisp it caught the light. His shoes were polished to a shine that belonged in a boardroom, not on a man struggling with hospital bills. My chest tightened, but I smothered the thought with excuses. Maybe it was borrowed. Maybe it was old. Don't think badly of them. Another time, Sophie had dropped by my apartment, her perfume too heavy for the tiny space. She laughed about a dinner she and Michael had attended at a downtown steakhouse, the kind where one plate costs more than my week's worth of groceries. "A friend invited us," she said with a careless shrug. I had forced a smile, but later, scrolling through social media, I saw her post from that very night, a photo of Richard raising a glass of red wine, captioned, treating Dad the way he deserves. My heart had pinched then, but I told myself it must have been an old photo. I chose harmony over confrontation. Even in their home, small details whispered louder than words. New curtains with fabric finer than anything I'd ever owned. A gleaming watch on Richard's wrist that caught the light whenever he gestured. Pearls dangling from Sophie's ears, though she had once laughed them off as cheap knockoffs. Each memory was a splinter I had smoothed over, a contradiction I had buried beneath polite smiles, but crouched behind those dumpsters, the scent of bleach stinging my nose. Every splinter drove deeper. I realized I hadn't been blind by accident. I had trained myself to look away, because questions bring conflict, and I had wanted peace. Now the peace tasted like ash. I pulled my coat tighter, staring at the empty space where the SUV had been. The cashier's warning coiled in my head, relentless. Maybe it wasn't jealousy. Maybe it wasn't gossip. Maybe it was the truth I'd been too afraid to face. And if it was true, then Michael, my kind, selfless boy, was standing on the edge of a trap he didn't even see. Asterisk, asterisk. The image of those glossy black bags haunted me through the night. I barely slept, tossing beneath thin blankets as the whisper circled my mind like a restless bird. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Richard's easy smile, the Range Rover's headlights cutting through the drizzle, and Michael's tired face bent over a kitchen table littered with unpaid bills. By dawn, I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed more than glimpses. I needed to know the rhythm of Richard's life when no one was watching. On Saturday, I told Michael I wanted to visit the farmer's market on Hawthorne. He smiled, offered to drive, but I shook my head. No, you rest. I'll take the bus. My voice was steady, but inside, nerves churned like storm clouds. The market was busy with stalls of winter squash and steaming coffee, yet I barely saw any of it. I walked 3 blocks to a small cafe with wide windows and ordered a plain black coffee. The cup trembled in my hands as I settled near the glass. From here, I had a clear view of the road where Richard's SUV would pass if he was headed to his supposed job at the hardware store. Minutes dragged. My palms were damp, despite the chill. What if I saw nothing? What if the cashier's warning really was just gossip, and I was about to ruin the fragile peace in Michael's marriage? Then, at exactly noon, the pale Range Rover rolled past. My chest seized. Richard was behind the wheel, sunglasses perched carelessly despite the gray sky. He did not turn toward the hardware store. Instead, he slowed at the gates of the Portland Country Club. The guard straightened and waved him through without hesitation, as if greeting a regular. I gripped my coffee cup so hard the lid buckled. The club's iron gates yawned open, revealing a drive lined with manicured hedges, the kind of wealth that gleamed even in winter. People drowning in debt do not stroll into country clubs in tailored jackets. 2 hours later, he re-emerged, posture straight, face glowing with satisfaction. In his hand was a leather briefcase, not groceries, not tools for work. He walked with the unhurried air of a man who believed the world owed him comfort. I ducked behind a bus shelter as he passed, heart hammering so loudly I feared he might hear it. He was humming, his lips curved in the same easy smile I had seen outside the supermarket. The contrast was unbearable. My son dragging himself home after double shifts, and Richard humming after an afternoon at a country club. The truth was no longer a shadow. It was a shape stepping boldly into the light. The following week, I moved like a woman caught between 2 worlds. By day, I baked bread, folded laundry, chatted politely with neighbors. By night, I stared at my phone, waiting for proof. The cashier hadn't lied. He sent me photos. The first receipt arrived on a Tuesday evening. My heart stuttered when I opened it. $572.86. 2 bottles of champagne at $90 each. Imported seafood, French cheeses. At the bottom, the name printed in bold, Richard Carter. I pressed the phone to my chest, eyes burning. This was no whisper. This was ink and numbers cold, undeniable. The second receipt came Thursday, nearly $600. The same week Sophie had called Michael sobbing about overdue rent. I felt something inside me snap. A brittle piece of hope breaking free. My son was working himself raw, while the family he trusted feasted like royalty. That Friday, the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I almost ignored it, but instinct told me otherwise. Mrs. Parker, a woman's voice, taut with anger. This is Anne Delaney. I live 2 doors down from the Carters. You don't know me, but you deserve to know. I gripped the receiver. Know what? Her words spilled like stones. Last weekend they threw a birthday party for Richard. catered imported wines, an ice sculpture in the yard. People whispered it must have cost thousands. Yet your son told my daughter they were struggling with hospital bills. Do you see, Mrs. Parker? Do you see what they're doing? My throat closed. I couldn't answer. Anne's voice shook, but her fury was steady. They're lying. They've been lying for years. I couldn't stay silent. After the call, I sat at the kitchen table. Coins for my prescriptions scattered before me like small, cold truths. My hands trembled as I counted them, and for the first time, I realized what I was holding wasn't just spare change. It was the measure of sacrifice, the very thing Richard had twisted into his theater of lies. Even the neighbors could see it. And neighbors, I knew, never gossip idly about money. They speak when resentment boils over, when deceit can no longer be tolerated. I lifted my gaze to the dim reflection in the kitchen window. My own eyes stared back, lined with age, rimmed with something harder than sorrow. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was a pattern, a strategy, a business built on my son's kindness. And I knew one thing with absolute certainty: if I didn't act, Michael would drown in it. ***. The receipts sat heavy in my phone, like stones pressing against my ribs. For days, I rehearsed what to say, but the words always turned to ash. How do you tell your child that the family he loves is feeding off his blood? One evening, Michael stopped by after work. His tie was crooked, his skin pale from long hours. He dropped into the chair across from me, rubbing his temples. "Clara just called," he muttered. "Her dad needs another procedure. Insurance won't cover it. They need $200 by Friday." The words struck me like a knife. The same phrasing, the same emergency, another page from the same tired script. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling as I reached for my phone. "Michael," I said softly, "there's something you need to see." He looked up, confused. His eyes, those same gentle eyes I had watched since boyhood, were rimmed with exhaustion. I opened the photos one by one and slid the screen across the table. "Receipts," I whispered. "Groceries, wine, champagne, all in Richard's name, dated the same weeks they begged you for help." Michael frowned, leaning closer. "Mom, these could be anyone's. Maybe they used his account for a work thing. Look closer." My voice cracked. "Look at the names. Look at the dates. Look at the amounts." He scrolled slowly, his jaw tightening. The second photo made him pause. The third made his hand shake. "Where did you get these?" His voice was low, rough. I told him about the cashier, about overhearing neighbors, about Anne Delaney's call. Each word landed heavy, like footsteps across thin ice. Michael pushed back from the table, pacing the small kitchen. He dragged both hands through his hair, the same way he had as a teenager when caught between choices. "No," he said finally, his voice breaking. "There has to be another explanation. Maybe Dad had a good month. Maybe they borrowed. Maybe," his words faltered, hollow even to himself. I wanted to reach for him, to gather him in my arms, but I knew he wasn't ready. His heart was still tied to Sophie, to the illusion of her family. "Son," I said gently, "love should not demand blindness. While you worked overtime, they feasted." His chest rose and fell, rapid, unsteady. He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed his coat, muttering, "I need to think. I need to see for myself." The door closed behind him, and I sat alone in the silence, my pulse hammering. I had placed the truth in his hands, but whether he would hold it or let it shatter, that was something I could not control. ***. Michael returned home that night with a weight in his chest heavier than any overtime shift. Sophie was already asleep on the couch, a blanket thrown over her legs, her phone glowing faintly in her hand. He stood for a moment in the doorway, staring at her peaceful face, torn between love and suspicion. What if Mom is wrong? He thought, what if I'm about to break everything for nothing? But then he remembered the receipts, the champagne, the laughter in Richard's smile, and something inside him whispered, "Look deeper." He moved quietly, heart pounding with each step. In their bedroom, he opened the closet, pushing aside coats and shoes. At first, there was nothing unusual, just the clutter of married life. But then, tucked behind a stack of shoeboxes, he found them. Glossy shopping bags from boutiques in downtown Portland, their handles still stiff as if barely touched. Inside were dresses with price tags dangling, velvet boxes with jewelry cushioned in silk. His breath caught in his throat. He kept searching, driven by equal parts dread and determination. In the back of the closet, beneath a pile of sweaters, his hand brushed against something spiral-bound, a notebook. He pulled it out, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened the cover. The handwriting was neat, unmistakably Sophie's. Each page was a ledger, column after column, of so-called emergencies: rent, $450, medicine, $300, car repair, $650. Next to every entry was the date and the amount Michael had sent. His hands trembled as he turned the pages, his eyes blurring with disbelief. It wasn't random, it wasn't desperate, it was organized, calculated. At the bottom of the last page, his breath stopped. Mom, dental surgery, $1,800. If he resists, remind him how much he owes us. Michael's vision swam. He pressed the heel of his palm to his eyes, but the words wouldn't fade. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't bad luck. This was a business. He snapped the notebook shut, his chest heaving. His world, once steady and familiar, now tilted like a floor, giving way beneath him. In the living room, Sophie stirred, murmuring his name. Michael shoved the ledger into his coat, his movements jerky, almost frantic. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "I'll be back." He left the apartment with the notebook clutched tight under his arm, stepping into the cold night air. The city lights blurred as he walked, each one a reminder of every sacrifice he had made, every night he had worked, every hour of sleep he had lost, while the family he trusted recorded his generosity like profits on a balance sheet. And he knew then, nothing would ever be the same. Asterisk. Michael stuffed clothes into a duffel bag with shaking hands. Every zipper felt like thunder, every breath like glass in his throat. Sophie stood in the doorway, mascara streaks drying on her cheeks, her voice pitched high with rage. "You'll regret this, Michael. You'll never find someone who gives you what I do." He paused only long enough to sling the strap over his shoulder. His voice was low, heavy. "I already regret ever believing you." Then he walked out into the night, the ledger pressed against his side like a wound he couldn't let go of. The cold Portland air slapped his face, but it felt cleaner than the lies he had just left behind. Each step down the stairwell was a release, though his heart ached with the weight of everything lost. Behind him, Sophie's sobs shifted, hardening into something darker. She grabbed her phone, fingers flying across the screen. "Dad," she choked. "He's leaving." He found the book. Richard's voice thundered through the speaker. "Don't panic. We'll handle this. He has nothing without us." By the next morning, Michael was gone. His small apartment near the river, already paid for with savings he had meant to use for a vacation. He sat on the bare mattress, staring at the gray walls, the silence pressing in, freedom and grief twisted together in his chest, sharp as barbed wire. Meanwhile, in the Carter household, denial became their armor. When neighbors whispered about Michael moving out, Sophie smiled bitterly and told them he had mental health struggles. Richard rehearsed explanations, each one smoother than the last. "It's all a misunderstanding," he assured Diane. "Receipts can be faked. He'll come crawling back once he realizes love is stronger than suspicion." But inside, Richard knew the battle had changed. The ledger was gone, and with it, their neat ledger of excuses. They needed to strike first, before Michael could. He called a lawyer he had once played golf with, arranging a meeting over bourbon at the country club. Sophie, her eyes still swollen, joined her father at the polished bar. Their words were hushed, clipped. "If he takes this to court," the lawyer warned, "you'll need to discredit him, paint him as unstable, stressed, manipulated by his mother." Sophie's lips curved into a bitter smile. "That won't be hard. He's been working himself sick. Everyone knows it." Outside, the December rain streaked down the windows like bars on a cage. The Carters were already building their defense, already sharpening lies into weapons. But what they didn't know, what none of them could imagine, was that Michael wasn't fighting alone anymore. Michael arrived at my apartment late that night, soaked through from the rain, the ledger still clutched under his arm. His eyes were hollow, but beneath the emptiness burned something sharper: determination I had never seen in him before. He dropped a notebook on my kitchen table, next to the receipts I had kept. The sound of it hitting the wood was final, like a judge's gavel. "They're going to fight me," he said, his voice rough. "Sophie and her father, they'll twist this. I need proof, so strong it can't be buried." I placed a hand over his. "Then we gather it, together." For the first time in weeks, he didn't pull away. The next days became a quiet mission. While the Carters plotted at their country club, we walked streets and knocked on doors. I spoke with Anne Delaney again. Her anger was fierce, her voice steady. "If a court needs me, I'll testify. I saw the parties. I saw the deliveries. They never lived like people drowning in debt. She handed me photos taken from her porch, the Carters unloading cases of wine, chefs arriving with trays of seafood. The cashier, nervous but resolute, agreed to print copies of every receipt tied to Richard's account. People talk, Mrs. Parker, he whispered, but numbers don't lie. Michael gathered his own trail of exhaustion timesheets from his company, emails showing last-minute overtime requests, pay stubs lined with extra hours. Each one was a record of his sacrifice, stacked against the Carters' lies. At night, we spread everything across the kitchen table: receipts, photos, payslips, notes from neighbors. The clutter of truth filled the room, lit by the harsh yellow bulb above us. Michael leaned over the evidence, his face tight with both pain and resolve. "They'll say I'm unstable," he muttered. "They'll say you manipulated me." "Then we show them the facts," I replied. "You don't fight lies with silence, Michael, you fight with light." He looked at me then, his eyes wet but clear. "I was so blind, Mom. I wanted to believe love was enough." I squeezed his hand. "Love is enough, but not when it's built on lies." As the rain hammered against the windows, I felt a shift inside both of us. For the first time, we weren't just victims stumbling in the dark. We were witnesses, building a case, brick by brick, until the wall of deceit the Carters had built would collapse under its own weight. And when it did, I swore my son would walk free. The courtroom smelled faintly of Polish and paper, its tall windows letting in a pale winter light. Michael sat beside me at the plaintiff's table, his hands clasped so tightly the knuckles blanched. Across from us, Sophie adjusted her blazer with practiced grace, her father Richard radiating confidence as if this were just another business meeting. Diane perched stiffly at their side, pearls at her throat gleaming under the fluorescent lights. When the judge entered, silence fell like a stone. The Carters' lawyer stood first. His voice was smooth, rehearsed. "Your Honor, what we have here is a young man under stress, manipulated by outside influence. My clients deny all allegations of deception. These so-called receipts and stories are circumstantial at best. This is not fraud, it is family conflict." Sophie nodded along, her face arranged into a mask of calm concern. Richard leaned back, lips curled in the hint of a smirk. My chest burned. They looked so sure of themselves, so certain they could twist truth into theater. Then our lawyer rose, his tone steady but firm. "Your Honor, we intend to prove a consistent pattern of financial exploitation, documented not only by receipts but by written records in the defendant's own handwriting." Michael shifted, the ledger heavy in his bag. I could see the tremor in his jaw, but his eyes never left Sophie's. The judge gestured. "Proceed." We began with the receipts, page after page projected on the courtroom screen. Champagne, designer groceries, imported seafood. Each date matched perfectly with Sophie's tearful calls about overdue rent or hospital bills. Sophie's composure flickered. Richard whispered sharply in her ear, but the whisper only made her jaw tighten. Then came the neighbors. Anne Delaney stepped forward, her voice clear, her anger controlled. "I saw the parties. I saw the catered trucks. This family lived like kings while crying poverty to Michael." The Carters' lawyer objected, but the judge overruled. Anne's words hung heavy in the air. Finally, the ledger. Michael's hands trembled as he laid it on the evidence table. The spiral-bound notebook looked almost ordinary, but when the pages flipped open, the courtroom shifted. Every fabricated emergency, every dollar amount, each line written in Sophie's neat handwriting. Our lawyer tapped the last page with a deliberate finger. "And here, Your Honor, a note in the margin. If he resists, remind him how much he owes us." Gasps rippled through the room. The judge's gaze darkened. Richard's smirk vanished. Sophie's face drained of color, her mask cracking as she whispered, "That's not," but the words died on her lips. Michael sat taller, the weight of years lifting, his voice finally breaking through the silence. "This isn't family conflict. This is betrayal, documented in black and white." For the first time, the Carters had no ready answer. The tension in the courtroom grew thicker with every turn of the ledger's pages. Richard shifted in his seat, his confident posture eroding as the words in black ink stacked up against him like bricks in a wall. Sophie kept her eyes fixed on the table, her fingers twisting her pearl necklace until the string nearly snapped. Our lawyer called the next witness, the cashier. He walked nervously to the stand, adjusting his tie, but when he spoke, His voice carried steady conviction. I served Mr. Carter many times. High-end groceries, luxury items, thousands of dollars worth. Every time, he paid eyes. Yet, I also overheard him boasting about how his son-in-law always covered emergencies. It didn't sound like a man in need. It sounded like a man running a scheme. Gasps stirred among the gallery. Richard's lawyer leapt to his feet, objecting, but the judge's gavel struck once. Overruled. Continue. Then came the photos Anne Delaney had provided. Projected onto the large screen, they showed delivery vans pulling up to the Carter home, chefs in crisp uniforms unloading trays, and guests in evening clothes sipping wine beneath the glow of string lights. The judge leaned forward. These photos are time-stamped. Yes, Your Honor, our lawyer confirmed. The same weekend Sophie Parker contacted my client, claiming her parents couldn't pay rent. Sophie's face crumpled, a sob breaking free. But it was not the cry of innocence, it was the sound of someone cornered. Richard tried one last attempt at bravado. He stood, ignoring his lawyer's tug at his sleeve. We never forced Michael to give us anything, he offered. He wanted to help. If he regrets it now, that's his weakness, not our crime. The room fell silent, every eye fixed on him. His words hung heavy, damning in their coldness. Our lawyer seized the moment. So you admit there was never true hardship, only manipulation. Richard's mouth opened, then closed. He realized too late the trap he had walked into. The judge's voice cut through like steel. Sit down, Mr. Carter. The gallery erupted in whispers. Reporters scribbled furiously. Flashes from cameras breaking across the wood-paneled walls. The mask of the Carter family, polished, charming, respectable, was cracking under the relentless weight of truth. Michael sat straighter beside me, his hands clenched but steady. For the first time in years, I saw light in his eyes. He had been their victim, but here, in this courtroom, he was no longer powerless. The judge turned, gaze stern, voice measured. The evidence presented paints a disturbing picture not of hardship, but of exploitation. At that moment, the Carter family stopped being untouchable. They became what they had always been beneath the silken pearls. Liars exposed to the light. And everyone was watching. Asterisk. The tension in the courtroom grew thicker with every turn of the ledger's pages. Richard shifted in his seat, his confident posture eroding as the words in black ink stacked up against him like bricks in a wall. Sophie kept her eyes fixed on the table, her fingers twisting her pearl necklace until the string nearly snapped. Our lawyer called the next witness, the cashier. He walked nervously to the stand, adjusting his tie, but when he spoke, his voice carried steady conviction. I served Mr. Carter many times. High-end groceries, luxury items, thousands of dollars worth. Every time, he paid eyes. Yet, I also overheard him boasting about how his son-in-law always covered emergencies. It didn't sound like a man in need. It sounded like a man running a scheme. Gasps stirred among the gallery. Richard's lawyer leapt to his feet, objecting, but the judge's gavel struck once. Overruled. Continue. Then came the photos Anne Delaney had provided. Projected onto the large screen, they showed delivery vans pulling up to the Carter home, chefs in crisp uniforms unloading trays, and guests in evening clothes sipping wine beneath the glow of string lights. The judge leaned forward. These photos are time-stamped. Yes, Your Honor, our lawyer confirmed. The same weekend Sophie Parker contacted my client, claiming her parents couldn't pay rent. Sophie's face crumpled, a sob breaking free. But it was not the cry of innocence, it was the sound of someone cornered. Richard tried one last attempt at bravado. He stood, ignoring his lawyer's tug at his sleeve. We never forced Michael to give us anything, he offered. He wanted to help. If he regrets it now, that's his weakness, not our crime. The room fell silent, every eye fixed on him. His words hung heavy, damning in their coldness. Our lawyer seized the moment. So you admit there was never true hardship, only manipulation. Richard's mouth opened, then closed. He realized too late the trap he had walked into. The judge's voice cut through like steel. Sit down, Mr. Carter. The gallery erupted in whispers. Reporters scribbled furiously. Flashes from cameras breaking across the wood-paneled walls. The mask of the Carter family, polished, charming, respectable, was cracking under the relentless weight of truth. Michael sat straighter beside me, his hands clenched but steady. For the first time in years, I saw light in his eyes. He had been their victim, but here, in this courtroom, he was no longer powerless. The judge turned, gaze stern, voice measured. The evidence presented paints a disturbing picture not of hardship, but of exploitation. At that moment, the Carter family stopped being untouchable. They became what they had always been beneath the silken pearls, liars exposed to the light, and everyone was watching. Asterisk, asterisk. God always blesses, and I am convinced that courage leads us to better days. Meanwhile, on the final screen, I leave you with two of the channel's most beloved stories. I'm sure they will surprise you.